code. And this is sort of a use case. It's a case study so you guys can see. I'm sure many of you have dealt with systems that are challenging to work with. So this is our attempt to help our customers out. I don't want to eat the microphone. Okay. So first I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Kirsten Hunter. I am an API evangelist for Akamai, and what that means is I am dedicated to making sure the developers who work with Akamai are successful. So I write sample code, I write tutorials, I do blog posts, I make things that help people to be successful as developers using Akamai. I myself have been working with REST APIs for over 10 years. I wrote a book called Irresistible APIs, so that kind of gives you an idea of where I'm coming from. In the time that I've been working with REST APIs, what I generally do is developer support. So I try to make sure that people who use the systems that I work on or represent make sure that they have a fantastic developer experience. And as I'm sure most of you have experienced, that is uncommon to have a great developer experience. There are a lot of places where we can improve as an industry, and in the DevOps world with automating things, it's particularly important that you guys have tools that you can really rely on. So for those of you who don't know what Akamai is, I'll just give you a quick overview. We're a content delivery network, and what that means is we're a big cache for the web. We have 200,000 servers worldwide. If you download something on your iPhone or on your Xbox, it's probably coming off an Akamai server. 30% of the traffic at any given time on the net comes off of an Akamai server. So we're that big gorilla in the room. And to give you an idea of the kind of volume that we're talking about and the kind of things that our customers do, when iOS 8 came out, Apple wanted to, they really wanted to release it to everyone in the world at exactly the same moment. Why? I don't know, but they thought it would be cool. So on that day in 2013, we ended up opening a pipe for them of 21 terabits a second. There was more traffic on that day than there was, so that was in 2013. There was more traffic on that day than there was in all of 2011. So things are moving in a way that's exponential, and we're one of the leaders in making sure that happens. But that just gives you an idea what we do. So we'll talk about the web portal. I know you guys have all had to deal with dashboards in systems that you're working with. So our web portal is super powerful. There's a lot of products that we have. There is a lot of configuration you can do. But it's not automatable. You know, you get a dashboard, that's the only way you can interact with the system, and it's almost impossible to automate. The Luna was organically grown, so it is kind of complex in the way it is. Mostly what it's used for is configuration and reporting. But again, no automation. However, Luna is moving to an API-first model, and the API-first model says we have a bunch of APIs on which we're building our configuration dashboard, and those are the same APIs that our customers can use. So that's something we're really proud of. But I'm going to get to the problem in just a minute. So the property manager application allows you to manage your properties. Think of it as Apache on steroids. So if you had an Apache configuration and it would do all of your image compression and keep track of whether you wanted to prefetch things or security settings, all of those things are possible in our system, but also, you know, simple things like redirects and various things that Apache can do in a smaller way. So intricate and very complex. There's 3,500 different things you can set on a property. It's also really prone to human error when you're using the website. Whenever somebody goes to use the website, they have to click buttons, fill in fields, and this causes a lot of errors. So we made the Property Manager API. We're super proud of the Property Manager API. It can do everything the Property Manager can do. However, as I mentioned, Property Manager is incredibly complex and intricate. And it's really hard to use the Property Manager API. It is not designed for usability. It's not really designed for automation. it is completely fully functional. It can do all of the things that you want. However, when you're trying to automate things, you don't necessarily want to have to make 17 calls to do a fairly simple thing. So we needed to deal with that. The other main problem is our APIs are designed like our products, and they assume that you understand our business logic, which you probably don't. So here's some concepts that you would have to really kind of understand in order to use the API appropriately. So there's accounts, and under accounts there's groups, and under the groups there's properties, and each property has versions. And then there's products that are associated with the different products, and then there's rules, and there's host names, there's activations. All of these things you have to understand in order to work with the system. And we're trying to abstract that away, because in a lot of cases we can guess what it is that you want. So the common use cases our customers have, the things that they want to be able to do, are create and update the properties that they have easily without making tens or hundreds of calls. They want to be able to do diffs between different versions of the same property or different properties themselves. And then there's a couple of things in the CI/CD world that we really want to support, and that's the idea of a development pipeline. So you have your configuration, you test it in development, you roll it to QA, you test it, you roll it. Like, this is the kind of thing that we really want people to be able to do. It works well with our customers' use cases and how they do their development. Without any kind of wrapper or SDK, this requires a large number of calls, and it requires that you get information from various places in order to make it happen. And then there's the ephemeral feature branch, which is, I'm working on my development box, I'm making a change to a feature in the configuration file. Now what I want to do is I want to just spin up a property with these rules so I can test them, and then tear it down for me, please. So we should behave like containers. We should make it possible for you guys to take those configurations and work with them. So to give you an idea of the processes, wow, yellow's not a very good color, is it? Sorry. The processes that we go through in order to create a new property, you have to get the groups and contracts so that you know which contract and group you're working with. You have to create, or you have to get the products, get a billing code, or make one, create the property, then you have to update a bunch of metadata about the property, like the origin and the billing code. I mean, these are things that need to be set. And then you publish the changes out to the system. So it's not overwhelming, but if you're going to do it a bunch of times, it's not really fun. So the property version diff, this is a really challenging one because our API was not made for this kind of action. And so right now, if you want to do a diff, first of all, you have to find the host name. Let's say you have www.example.com, and you want to do a diff between two property versions. So first, we have to check the existing groups and properties. We need to find out where that host name is mapped to a property. And then for that property, we need to get the host names, the rules, the metadata, and information about the activations for both of the versions, and then compare them, which is more work than we want you guys to have to do. So the customer goals are painless creation of new properties. They want to just be able to say, create a property, and it should look like that one. Go. Right? You shouldn't have to be like, well, I need it to be in this group with this contract. So the main customer goal that we have is the CI/CD integration. We have a lot of people, especially our resellers, but even some of our regular customers like Microsoft, who have an enormous number of properties that they use for various different things. This is something that they want to automate. They want to make sure that they can be certain that the template is being used consistently across all of the properties. So we had a lot of customers coming to us and saying, this isn't working for me. Like, the API is not what I want. So, and they also wanted to be able to have known good deployments, right? So a snapshot where they knew that it was working correctly. in the infrastructure as code, what they really want to do is keep the configurations themselves. They don't really care to go get the configuration every time from our system. They want to check it in to their own source control and work with it. So I made a couple of, we have a couple of tools that I'm going to talk about. Here, see, we got to the good part. So a data store. Diff is the thing that I was asked for most when I went to visit them and teach them how to use the APIs. They were like, so where's the diff? I want a diff. I'm like, well, you can diff in Luna. And they said, yeah, that's XML. So there's some people who think XML is great, and there's some people who would rather not look at it. So those people really wanted a diff, which I think is totally reasonable. You want to be able to tell how your how your properties are different. So it pulls the account tree, it goes through the groups, it goes through the properties, it goes through the versions, and it creates a Git repository out of the whole thing. And now you can use Git's tools for working with the metadata about your properties. This is actually something you guys could do with any system that has a lot of configuration data that's all stored in text, where you can't actually find what you're looking for. Which of my properties use this billing code? Which of my properties have prefetching turned on? How can I find that out? One of the other things that this did was the property ID is how Property Manager API thinks about things. But it's probably not how our customers think about things. Our customers think about things in terms of the property name, property being a website, or one of the host names. So that was helpful and useful, and a lot of our customers used it. They automated this information. They grab it every 10 minutes. It doesn't take very long. And so that was helpful, but they still wanted to do continuous integration, and committing things to the Git repository does not actually publish them to the system yet. So we created ConfigKit, and ConfigKit is a wrapper. It is also an SDK. It is a node-based application. And what it does is it wraps all this functionality. So it makes it possible to create something. It figures out what you probably want. It creates it for you. It deploys it. You can update your rules, and then it will publish them to staging. You can run whatever tests you want, and then it'll publish it to production. It supports all of the use cases other than the diff. So now with ConfigKit, you don't have to know how to create a CP code, billing code. It just creates one for you. We want people to be able to have separate billing codes for separate properties. So we'll just assume, unless you tell us what billing code to use, that you want a new one. It creates the property. It creates a host name. It updates the property with the information. And it wraps this all in a toolkit, which actually has a gulp integration as well. So our goal is to make it so that you can check something into your source code management, and then it'll be deployed for you to be able to do the testing. All right. So update. This is the sort of the meat of the CI/CD Jenkins kind of integration, where we make it so that all you need to do is update the rules. You check them in. Our intent is for you to then be able to have an automatic process that will deploy that to the system. Deploying different rule sets is actually quite powerful. We do have some customers who do deployment on Friday afternoon of a particular configuration for their properties, and for the weekend traffic. And then on Sunday night, they deploy a new version for the weekday traffic. So the ability to sort of adjust what's happening on your system is really helpful, but if you have to go into Luna each time into the web portal at 3 o'clock in the morning when you need to do the update, it's not ideal. So in the development pipeline, the notion is that, and we have several customers who have these different environments. They have the development environment, the QA environment, the staging environment, the production environment. And they really need to be able to verify that whatever changes they make to the configuration are safe and good and don't cause any regressions. So we're really working hard on this particular one, but the build up teardown of a property for testing is actually, I think, really powerful. It'll be really helpful for people. I know that it's very similar to a lot of what folks are doing with Docker and other container systems. Being able to test in a clean and fresh environment is incredibly helpful. So the other things ConfigKit can do are currently based on what customers have told us they want it to do. So activate and deactivate, delete and retrieve. These are pretty basic things that we can do. All of the commands support the property name or the host name, so you don't have to know the property ID. As far as I'm concerned, a customer should never be exposed to their property ID. It's not really useful information for them, and it's just extra noise. There is a simple, so it's a node library, as I said. It's got a simple interface on the command line. It's actually available on GitHub, and the library interface is quite well documented. So if you do use Node, it's quite easy to use. And we have done our very best to make it as readable as possible, the code. So if you guys are working with a different system, but you want to do something similar, feel free to branch our stuff. Okay, so the results. Just to give you an idea, we have some really big customers that do this rolling config thing all the time, every week for 100 hosts. One of our customers does it every week for 100 hosts. So we had professional services rolling these configs manually, and it was taking 10 hours a week, which is pretty expensive for our professional services team, and it's not really what we want our PS team to be doing. We want them to be doing things where they're adding value. So now it takes less than an hour to do all of them, and we're improving it even more. So what we're doing here is really finding what the pain points are of our customers, and we're trying to target as much as possible the operations side, because that's where people are keeping track of configurations and making sure systems are working correctly, and we need to make sure that we're meeting those needs. Okay, so the next steps. Sorry, talked fast. Didn't have a lot of time, so. Next steps, I would love, I don't know that I'm going to be able to do this because I work for the company that I wrote the code for, but I would really like to abstract it so we can make plugins for Fastly and CloudFront. Because you guys, a lot of you have both, 3, lots of them. I would like for people to be able to move between the different vendors with the same tool set. So I would love to do that in all my spare time. I will get right on that. But the obvious one from what I've talked about here is integrating the data store with ConfigKit, right? So you can pull that data store, you can work in the data store, you can make a change to the rules file, you check it in, and then it just does the right thing for you. So that's definitely coming. But the secure host creation is the next thing on my list. That's what I'm doing next week. Maybe it'll take a little longer than that. We use Let's Encrypt. We actually have a really awesome API for certificate management. You could automate the whole thing. Now, how can you automate the whole thing, you think? That doesn't make any sense. You have to do domain validation. Aha! But there are 2 ways you can do domain validation if you use Akamai. One is to use DNS, which is cheating. But we have DNS, so you can use it. And the other one is to change the property so that it uses a non-secure host name, set up the redirect on the property, push it out, poll until Let's Encrypt says they're groovy, get your certificate, and go ahead and deploy the secure host on the system. So we have, of course, all of our customers want to use secure hosts as much as possible. And so it's important for us to make that part of the automatable process. And yes, it's going to take an hour to go through the whole process, but if it's automated and you trust it, you can fire and forget. You can send it, and then you know that the system's going to come up, and you can just have it send you an email when that happens. So what could we do better? Well, we could do lots of things better. um, Having a great and powerful API is not the same as having a usable API. And if you don't listen to your customers, and in our case, I'm talking about developers and DevOps operations folks, if we don't understand how it is that you're going to use the product, then we're not going to do a good job of giving you tools that are helpful. The things we learned. We're also working on making our newer APIs more usable and use case based, but we still have the older ones, and we need to make sure that they work correctly. So I was actually talking to Adrian about this, and he pointed out that there are great systems where the APIs failed. And why did the APIs fail? Because there was a terrible developer experience. The success of your API is based on how well people can use it and whether they can be successful with it. So one of the things that we're really trying to do is make sure that we're listening to our customers about what they need. And of course, obviously, in retrospect, we should have known, if we'd thought about it for a minute, that our customers would want to deploy properties and change the configuration. We didn't make that super easy. We should have. All right. So if you want to look at the code, it's there. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody? Come on. It's in Node. It requires Node 7. It has promises. But if you don't like Node, then there's the command line utility, which is designed. And there's a gulp integration, too. So you can just kick it off. All right, well, if that's it, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
about like instant VMs, the containers a week.
data resolution is king.
not as important as them being transparent and convenient to reason about. So like Datadog's agent, it puts out data. If you want to send that to Sconis, it works. That's fine. Our agent exports JSON over HTTP, which I know that Datadog can consume. It's not that. I don't think.
Mention Grafana, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my own employer and say that that's one of the things. One of the things that I think is very compelling about what we do at Datadog is pulling in from all of these different systems into one set of dashboards so you can look at one place. I'm hesitant to say the word single pane of glass because the number of times somebody has tried to sell me a monitoring product in my career that they claimed would be the single pane of glass, and I was like, maybe not. But I think we're getting closer to that point. At least where I'm no longer going like, oh, I've got a Cassandra problem. Let me look at this one monitoring tool, and now I've got but maybe it's closer to be like an I/O issue at the disk. Let me look at this other monitoring tool. Look over here.
That you can put stuff. And so do you have one monitoring system trying to track what's going on in 16 regions, or are you trying to federate stuff across them? What is your view of these things? So there's a data export, data cross-reference. If you see an alert from one system, how do you get to the other systems that it's involved in? You really want to have sort of URLs embedded in things that take you to the other tool to see the other thing. So that's the area where I think it's still a bit flaky. And particularly, this is something that I've beaten into a few tools by shouting at people over a long time, is to have deep linking and embedding. If somebody's got a tool and I'm looking at a page and a view of that tool, I want to have either be able to cut and paste the URL or have a button that generates the URL I can put into a chat session or something, and somebody else can click on it and go to exactly what I was looking at. Because you have to log in and navigate deep into something, it's pointless, right? So that's deep linking. Embedding means I can take a view and embed it somewhere else. So if I'm generating a little strip chart of some kind somewhere in a tool, I want to be able to embed that in a dashboard somewhere else, just as a thing. Might be a GIF that updates occasionally, or it might be a PNG or whatever, or it might be a live plugin JavaScript thing. But those are the kinds of things that if the tool supports those, then you can start blending things together and getting the big picture kind of stuff. So I think that's important. And the whole area just federating across really distributed systems is another area that we need to have some better solutions for, I think.
And just to clarify why I asked the question, you have different domains. You have monitoring, you have network data, you have application data. And the tools don't necessarily agree on approach, right? So the point of when I'm trying to do an analysis across one problem, I'm not looking at one piece at a time. So that
Yeah.
that was prompting the
If you
question.
pull up Catchpoint, it tells you there's some DNS screw up somewhere in the world. You're like, okay, how does that relate to whatever's going on somewhere else? I mean, that's somewhere out in the network. There is a thing that is somehow related to some of the, there's all these different layers that we're trying to coordinate, need to hook up.
I definitely agree that if you're looking at security tooling and network tooling and traditional like metrics and APM, those things, the only hope that we have today is that they do support deep linking and you can modify what you're looking at to kind of customize where you jump to so that you make it easy for operators to kind of custom build the dashboards to feed them back and forth. But data transfer between them, they don't talk the same languages at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's really different underlying schemas, like APM and networking are sort of, there are touch points, but they're very, like if you're doing mobile monitoring, mobile app monitoring, again, very different set of problems. So hard to get them all in one place.
So we're reaching toward the end of the panel. Definitely would like to leave the opportunity to ask a couple of questions from you guys. So if anybody wants to volunteer or have a question, now is a good time.
the question is, what are we using for event correlation? In our product, we don't really deal with events. We deal with telemetry streams. So we're doing basically vector correlations at that point, and that stuff's all internal, custom stuff. Yeah, we have a analytics language called Cackle that's written inside of Luajit on inside of our database, so that the analytics actually happen data local to the stream, so we don't have to move the data off the node to do the analysis. So it's kind of like a very math-oriented, JITted map and reduce system around that. That's very specific to that, but it doesn't do individual events. I know like companies like Moog do much more robust event-related correlation, and they have their own magic sauce for that as well.
Yeah, I guess there's Riemann is the open source thing, and then there's Moogsoft and Big Panda, the other players in that space. That maybe there's a few others. I think you're starting to see people like PagerDuty starting to add more of that kind of functionality, maybe VictorOps, so that each tool typically has a place where it starts, and then they grow out into adjacent areas. So some people are starting with event correlation and growing out from there. Others are growing into it. The usual problem is a really dirty data source. There's lots of duplication and badly formed events and things like that. So it's a huge data cleanup problem. And then on top of that, you've got to, add some understanding and make sense of it. That's what particularly I'd say Big Panda and Moogsoft are off trying to do that in different ways, different approaches, different target markets. They have some overlap, but maybe Instana are doing some interesting work in that space too. And probably Datadog. Yeah, you got some people. I know you got a few people working on that. There was a good talk you did. I saw recently.
Did we have any other questions from the? Cool.
You mentioned going from monitoring from a server to a VM to a container down to a Lambda. In the last two, you mentioned it's obviously harder for what you actually monitor. How do you do it? What sort of things are best practices? What do you look at in a container, and what do you try to monitor? Do you consider monitoring?
It basically are moving to it's APM at that point, so application performance monitoring. Like the utilization of a Lambda system is always 100%, because when it stops, it turns itself off and you stop paying for it. So there's no point gathering the CPU utilization of your Lambda system. But the end-to-end tracing and things like Zipkin and the DAPA paper from Google in 2010. Zipkin was an implementation of that was open source starting about 2012. Netflix built a thing very much like DAPA that it uses. There's now several applications out there. There's an open tracing initiative, which is a standard API for instrumenting your code with trace points. And AWS has a new product called X-Ray, which is again APM, application tracing end to end. The interesting thing with X-Ray is it reaches into the services that AWS has built. So you can use it to trace traffic going in and out of the database and the queuing things and SQS and whatever, which is something that, and Lambda as well. So there's some Lambda tracing now just coming into preview. So that's new capability. But that gives people in end-to-end, you get a tree of requests coming across your system that all gather together, and you can instrument, see the latency end-to-end. But it's at that point, it's very application-centric, and the schemas and the metrics you get out of that aren't time series things that you'd put on a strip chart, right? It's much more like when you pull up that browser monitoring thing to see where the web page came from, and you get the sort of Gantt chart-like thing that shows you where all the different bits of the page came from. It's much more like that kind of view to see where the slow things are.
And I mean, part of the reason we're moving to these smaller and smaller pieces, and so as a result, they're interacting with each other more and more as well. So in the tools that we're looking for, and whether it's tracing or metrics or what have you, I mean, it's important that we're now looking much more across not just systems boundaries like we've done in the past, but also across service and application boundaries. Like, you want to have that visibility at multiple levels. Like when that request came in, okay, it blocked here. Why did it block there and keep going all the way down the stack? So like Adrian mentioned, the waterfall graphs and flame graphs, things like that are a much better kind of way to look at this. So yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I kind of alluded to this in my talk earlier, is that machines go really fast. So the idea of doing these traces are fantastic, and looking at waterfall graphs are awesome. When you do 500 million of those a day, you can't look at them anymore. You can look at one of them and you can go analyze them, but you also can't afford to store all of these interactions as they go forever. So I think there's a combination of those two things. Like you really need the X-ray style stuff where you can see all of the interactions, but there's an opportunity there for the existing monitoring systems to take those things out, and they're not strip charts necessarily, but you can do behavioral modeling of those, so you can understand when you have performance regressions. You can tie that to code releases. You can tie that to changes in architecture and things like that. So I think that both systems will change dramatically, but they will probably fit together pretty well still afterwards.
Yeah, I'd like to see a more general use of histograms and distributions. We should be looking at latency distributions particularly, because the long tail, the outliers are actually the interesting points when you have a long latency. Why do you have 99th percentile out there? You should actually just be looking at the 1% that's taking a long time, trying to figure out why they're taking a long time. Maybe there's a garbage collecting thing in the middle, but this is something that we've been in violent agreement on for a while. Just if you're not looking at distributions, then you're confused. If you're looking at average instead of distributions, you're getting very confused by why things are behaving the way they are.
Well, thank you guys very much for sharing your thoughts, and thanks for attending. Everything is going to be recorded.
Okay. All right. Cheers. Thank you.
I am not. This man is.
You're going to be here, bro?
Yep. Can you hear me? Yep. All right. About to talk about a group that actually provides free beer. Free beer over.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sometimes happens. All right, so let's get this mic back on you.
Okay.
Where do you want this?
You can just hook it on my.
It is. That mic is fine.
Oh, my dog. Mhm. Welcome, folks. Come on in and explore the Postgres universe with us. We're a local group that provides plenty of free beer at all of our events. Let me tell you about some upcoming events where there'll be free, local, independent craft beer.
So when we get close to the end of the time, I or somebody else will be sitting in the front row. We'll show you signs that give you a 5-minute warning,
Okay.
and then a 1-minute warning, and then when 0 shows up, you aren't already wrapped up. We'd appreciate it if you messed up.
Okay. Sounds great. Are we? Actually, I just need a countdown for when we're ready to start. What time is it right now?
It is now 4:50.
Okay.
Are we rolling over there?
And then I can just advance by hitting my thing.
I'm going to, I guess, announce for the recording here. All right. You ready?
Certainly.
All right. So one of the things we're doing differently this year at DevOps Days 2017 is we're getting more engagement from local user groups. We've invited a number to come speak with us and present topics relevant to their audience and to their community, and get hopes of helping make some connections, since we have such a large demographic here. So with that, we have Debbie Serta from the Austin PostgreSQL user group, and she's going to be talking about exploring the PostgreSQL universe.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. And thank you to everyone else here at DevOps Days who has been very supportive. Really appreciate supporting the local community of Postgres. And so today I just want to give you all a quick overview of the Postgres universe. Before we do that, and before I talk about myself, I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about a hero of mine. Someone who I've met, kind of a Russian cosmonaut, if you will. His name is Oleg Bartanov. He is a research scientist at the Sternberg Astronomical Institute at the Moscow State University. He's actually head of the award-winning Russian Astronomical Network, founder of Russian Scientific Network. He's with the astronomy department of the physics department there as well at Lomonosov's Moscow State University. Now, you may wonder why I'm talking about astronomers, and also why I have a photo here of a galaxy. And this is actually the Perseus Pisces supercluster of galaxies located about 250 million light years away from us. Well, you see, Oleg handles the information management in astronomy in the framework of the Virtual Observatory. During his professional work at Sternberg Astronomical Institute, he realized a need for a free and powerful open source database like Postgres. Now, at that time, he was thinking of Postgres 95, because this is about 1996. Since then, he's extensively used Postgres in his scientific work and many other projects. And indeed, the reason he's been a hero to me is not because of his work in physics and astronomy. That's something I just learned today. But because he's an active member of the Russian Postgres community. He's advocated for the adoption of Postgres by the astronomical community. And so one of his scientific projects makes use of scalable indexing of multi-terabyte sky catalogs developed for Postgres, which outperforms known techniques used in commercial databases. And so, as I said, he's been involved since 1996 in Postgres, major developer and a member of the Postgres Development Group, which is an international group, and developed infrastructure for implementing user-defined index access methods. And his latest contribution, he's been doing binary storage for nested structures, which allows implementation of nested HStore and efficient JSON data types. And in fact, I'm wearing a shirt today that is not only orange because I'm a UT alum, but also this is a shirt that he gifted me last month. And as I said, I consider him to be one of the cosmonauts in the universe of Postgres. And also maybe by telling you about Oleg, you can understand my story and why I'm here today. So who am I? I'm an organizer for the Austin Postgres User Group, which is an associated Postgres user group of PGUS. I hope that sounds good. Can you all hear me? Good. I'm an organizer for the PG Day Austin and PG Conf US, which is a national conference, as well as locals. We'll be having an event here soon I'll talk about later. I'm also the director and secretary for the US Postgres Association. And I also sit on the advisory board for Chick Tech Austin, as well as part of that is the Advancing Careers in Technical Women. We're having an event here in Austin in August, and one in Phoenix in next year. And so I'm involved with that as well. I believe that everyone can be involved in that. It's not just about women. We need men there to dialogue and help us and support us. So definitely call for papers is open for Austin. So those are the things, my little kind of plugs for some of the things I do. But really, how did I get here? And why Postgres? Well, my background is in biology. I have a Bachelor of Science from here at UT. I've spent 20 years in the water industry. 10 years of that was as a drinking water quality specialist for the state of Texas. Now, during that time, I essentially was doing compliance monitoring for over 6,700 public water systems and working with data, water quality data that came about starting in 1998 when the Safe Drinking Water Act was adopted. And then when I walked in 2000, the legacy databases we were working in were FoxPro and Microsoft Access. Indeed, I spent many a time working with coworkers saying, quit putting everything in Excel, at least get into Access, so you don't lose it. At the same time, I was having to import laboratory data and cringing, waiting to see what would break when we got to 1 million records in an Access database. We did have some instances of SQL. We also had some issues with having contractors come in and build this, that, and the other. So what happened there is we had a lot of data silos in different frameworks. And the problem with this is it's not just on the state level. This happens on the federal level as well. Having had to work with EPA's data and knowing that there are certain data sets that live nowhere near each other, and they're not mapped in such a manner that you can actually attach them together. Because one of the things I also worked on was the annual drinking water report, where we had to pull all that data into a report, and it was near impossible to do that. And so why Postgres? Well, as you can understand from being a bit of a data geek or dealing with the frustrations of antiquated data storage and such and handling, where you're not allowed to put null. So that's why if you go and look and find that there were a lot of wells drilled on January 1st, 1918, many hundreds, okay? So because of that, I was just really enamored when part of my kind of geek by association community introduced me to Postgres several years ago. Postgres has over 20 years of active and mature development. It's a proven database architecture. Reliable, robust. Data integrity is wonderful. Correctness. Also scalability, both horizontal and vertical, which is something a lot of people don't plan for. And then extensible. There's a lot of things you can do with it. A lot of it doesn't have to exist within itself. You can use it in conjunction with other things, whether it's NoSQL, Cassandra, Hadoop, MongoDB, all those sort of things. And it's 100% open source. It's fully ACID compliant relational database management system. We have a rich and evolving set of features. And so as each version comes about, we are looking to what are the needs that need to be met, being innovative and evolving and keeping up pace with what the demand is. Big data, deep computing, we got it, right? And focus on quality, security, and meeting those specs. High availability and performance. There are tens of thousands of transaction rates per second. The databases can be quite large, up to a petabyte. And cross-platform is supported by many application stacks. Operates natively on all modern systems, so scales from small scale, you can have it on your laptop, to doing large enterprise clusters. Installation is actually quite easy, especially if you're working with something like, say, Docker, actually ships that. A lot of the containers ship Postgres with their packages, so use it when you've got those one clicks. We always recommend, though, if you're going to go out and look for it, that you get it from community maintained repo, because if you go to a distribution list or something that's maybe off of our global development group site, then it's not necessarily maintained and be outdated. Or if you got a little extra time on your hand, you can always build from source. Now, why Postgres? Again, well, a single Postgres server can manage multiple databases. It can be a little confusing at times because in Postgres we'll talk about having the cluster, so it's the entire group on a single server is referred to as cluster. Most importantly, for those of you who are in DevOps, you'll know that sometimes maybe it's not cost effective to have a DBA or hire someone who can do Postgres development or maintain something that you've inherited, so you become that accidental DBA. And so it's a really very easy to stand up an instance, get it going, and find the support. Now, I could go on about how to set up Postgres, but really we are here to talk a little bit about our community. And plus, also, I will say, for the record, I am not a Postgres developer, but I feel that my experience and having actually worked in some of those old databases back in the day and doing application development, on that side of it, I can understand and appreciate what I know and know enough to know what I don't know. But go to postgresql.org to find all the information. And some of the information I've just given you is actually inspired by Christoph Pettis's talk, When It's Not Your Job, and which is definitely geared to DevOps. And he presented that at PGConf US in 2016. Or come to a local Austin Pug event. So who is Postgres? Again, we go back to this photo I showed before, and the reason why I wanted to show this is the idea that each one of these circles, those bright circles, are actually independent galaxies. And then you realize those galaxies are made up of stars. And that's kind of what I think about when I think about the Postgres community, right? Because you've got these groups that exist in their own little galaxy, but then they are still kind of connected through that Postgres universe, right? And so our formal Postgres community membership is the U.S. Postgres Association, which I mentioned I'm a director and secretary for, Postgres EU, España, and then also Russia, which is, as I said, the one that Oleg is involved with and is one of the founders. Now, if you have some interest in connecting to our Postgres community, here's a really great way to do it. I was talking to a young man on the way who walked me in here was asking me, how do I get started, or where would I go? The first thing I would say is listen. Join our mailing list. We got really great ones there. We have advocacy, announce, hackers, blogs. If you go to planetpostgres.org, we actually have an RSS feed that pulls in all of the Postgres-related content coming from our community, from the companies that support. I know Robert Treat from OmniTI was here earlier. Robert actually was a board member as well of U.S. Postgres Association, so he's definitely someone to grab. OpenSCG, Second Quadrant, Crunchy Data, Postgres Experts, and that's a great thing is there's a lot of kind of a handful of what we call the sort of collaborative competitors that we all kind of come together in some of these at some of these large events. You can participate. The old school guys, you can find them hanging out in IRC. Some of the younger folks, and I say younger folks and those who are kind of grabbing on all of it, are in Slack. And then our Postgres user groups. We have them all listed on our site. And then what is it that our members can do? Well, they can do all kinds of things. They can definitely contribute. We need folks to help code. We need folks to help review and test, and also to help with documentation. We have what we call committers. They're added about annually by the core team. And there's information. We have a wiki that you can check that out and find out more. But the highlights of that are essentially to be a committer, we ask that folks have spent several years of contributing to projects, and that's kind of consecutive, so multiple and contributing code contributions. They're responsible for maintenance of one or more code base areas. They also will track record of reviewing and help. We also track record of reviewing and helping other contributors with their patches. One of the ways we do that is with Commit Fest. Commit Fest is held about every other month. There's a manager who's assigned to it. People go through that. And then finally, when those people have shown that they can actually make high quality contributions and that there's very little need for revision or corrections, then that's a great candidate. And finally, a demonstrated understanding of the process and criteria for patch acceptance. That is what has been defined by the core team. And so, we obviously have people who maybe are a bit more non-technical or maybe want to take a break from their usual technical thing, so they can communicate and advocate. We actually will have a booth this next week at OzCon. So please, if you're going to OzCon, come and visit us in the Nonprofit Pavilion. If you aren't, but you'd like to go, please ping me or go to our meetup group, and I need to get this posted. But we do have a code for free of the Expo Hall Plus Pass. So if you need that, I'd be happy to get that code for you, because I'd love to see you come in there. And then also we are involved with let's see, I'll be speaking at the Southeast Linux Fest soon. We're very involved with the Linux community, PostGIS, Python, and such. We ask if you're going to be involved and you have some interest, or maybe you could see with what you're doing connects to Postgres, is we encourage folks to speak at our PG Days, Postgres Open, as well as PG Conf. So, where to find us? Well, our local community, you can find us definitely at a lot of events. We have our events listed at meetup.com. It's kind of where we mobilize. I have a list there of what we got coming up. 2 weeks. Yes, 2 weeks from today. Is that correct? Or no, not 2 weeks from today. It's not Tuesday. The day before Data Layer. Anyone go Data Layer? Okay. The day before that, on Tuesday, April 16th, we're having a PG Conf Mini. It's free craft beer, free pizza, and 3 Postgres experts who are coming in. 2 of them are from within the States, another who is actually from Europe, are going to be speaking that night on top mistakes made when migrating from Oracle into Postgres is one of our topics. We also have, let's see if I have the list here, one that's about Debian and using that, and then another one about AWS versus SoftLayer. And so we encourage y'all to check that out. Saturday, August 26th is our PG Day Austin. We do have a website we just started, but you can also find it on the meetup. And that will be a ticketed event, but we definitely hope to keep that affordable, because we'll have quite a few sponsors, and we are looking for sponsorship, by the way, as well. But that'll be great. That's going to be a one-day event. September 6th or 8th is PG Open. Now, notice this is in San Francisco. It used to be in Dallas, but I wanted to put it out there in case you were used to going to that or heard about it. It's really great. There's a day of tutorials, and then I think 1 or 2 days, maybe 2 days of sessions. And finally, on Friday, November 3rd and Saturday, November 4th, we're going to host the PG Conf Austin. So that's going to be, the first day will be paid trainings, tutorials. Saturday is going to be a full day of content at the Norris Conference Center. We're really looking forward to that. And that essentially is one of the new series from PG Conf. We had about almost 400 people at our event in Jersey City last month. And we looked at really kind of taking all that fantastic content and experiences we get there and push it out to our local communities. So we've got Denver, Seattle, Philly, Austin are all coming online, and so we'll have one here. As I said, go to our meetup page and you'll find more. Or just go ahead and contact me. And look, I'm missing something on there. Oh, no, it's there. dcerta@postgres.us. So the S decided to move. With that, that's kind of my sort of overview for y'all. If you'd like, I've got everything from some how to join the U.S. Postgres Association postcards, and I also have something on our current version of Postgres 9.6. That was really great because I think that's the one that introduced a lot of things that if Mr. Treat was here, he could talk more about. But things such as being able to use foreign data wrappers, searching within, being able to better text search within phrases. And we're projecting that version 10, we're actually jumping up to full to 10, will be coming out in August. So we look forward to hopefully that being something that when you come to PG Day Austin, there'll be a great time to sort of on board and hear more about that. So with that, that's it for me. If anyone has any questions, feel free. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for supporting Postgres and as well as the open source community at large. So thank you. Yeah. Did I say April? It's May. Oh, did it? I haven't slept much. And I haven't slept much or drank enough. May the 16th. So, yes, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, come on up. So this is about the ACTW. Here, I'll take this off.